Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, December 16th, 2020. And this is the regular meeting of the Sandpoint City Council. I now call to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street in Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I'm Mayor Shelby Ronstadt, presiding. Council members Shannon Sherman and Deb Rule are present and participating remotely. Council members Joel Espiro and Kate McAllister are present here in chambers. And it looks like we're missing Councilman Andy Groth and Councilman John Darling this evening. We will now rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First, are announcements. Are there any announcements from council? Okay, staff.
No, Mr. Mayor, no announcements this evening.
Okay, got a couple. Aaron Qualls, our longtime planning director, is moving on, seeking new opportunities. And Aaron's been in service here to the city for quite some time. He served on the Planning and Zoning Commission. He served on the Sandpoint City Council and as a planner, and then as a planning director now for, I think, 5 years. Does it sound right? So we really appreciate his service. Aaron was loved by everyone here at City Hall and by everyone I feel that he worked with throughout the city. And I certainly appreciated the service. I appreciated him as a person and what he brought to City Hall. And he was a friend and a good colleague. So we wish him the best in his new adventures. Also, chairperson elections for 2021 were held during yesterday's Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Commissioner Jason Welker has been elected as the new commission chairman, and Commissioner John Hastings has been elected as vice chairman. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Commissioner Tom Riggs for his service as chairman for the past several years, and Commissioner Slade Camp, who's been serving as vice chair. Congratulations to Chairman Welker and Vice Chairman Hastings. Your leadership will be especially important as we enter 2021 with unprecedented development activity. Acting as a P&Z commissioner is a volunteer effort and a significant undertaking. Their ongoing service to our community is very much appreciated. I have another announcement, and I would really appreciate council's feedback on this, please. Councilwoman Rule has submitted an agenda request form this past Friday seeking council approval to require all businesses within Sandpoint to post mask mandate signage. Administrator Jennifer Stapleton made me and City Attorney Andy Dillon aware of this request Friday afternoon. Jennifer and I also conferred with Council President Sherman. This action would require the council to adopt a city ordinance. The drafting of an ordinance takes a fair amount of staff time in advance of council consideration. There's no action item for this on tonight's agenda, and I am not requesting a formal vote. Before determining whether to add this to a future agenda as an agenda item and directing staff to undertake the effort to draft an ordinance, I'd like to gauge council's interest in considering adoption of this type of ordinance. So with that, council, I would open up the floor, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on Councilwoman Rule's suggestion.
No.
Okay, we have a no. Thank you, Joel.
So, Mr. Mayor, would this just be for the sign?
Let me pass it over to Councilwoman Rule. If you would like to expand on what your request is, I think we'd all benefit from that. Oh, we can't hear you.
I'm unmuted now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is about the city being socially responsible. This is about educating the public in a uniform and consistent manner. This is not about mandating the masks. That's already been done by the Panhandle Health District. The city at our last meeting said that we are educating. It seems very loose and without direction. This is about strong leadership, having the courage to step forward and protect our healthcare workers, protect our citizens. It's about doing the right thing, not the easy thing. Consistent and uniform public education by posting a graphic of a mask with masks mandatory accompanied by the Panhandle Health Order to be posted on any entrance that is used by the public at businesses within the city limits. This is a simple step. Education, education, education. The governor has just reminded us we will soon be rationing medical care for all patients. I'd like to point out that we have 23 ICU critical care COVID patients, and we only have 26 critical care beds at Kootenai Medical Center. So again, as the governor pointed out, if anybody else gets sick for any other reason, is in a serious motor vehicle accident, they may not have a bed for you. So again, this is about education, consistent education, and protecting the public, our families, our friends, our loved ones.
Thank you, Council. Appreciate that. Is there anyone that would like to second or support the suggestion to bring this before council vote at the next council meeting?
Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
I'd just like to say a few things. I understand where Deb is coming from, and I believe her words are incredibly sincere, as they always have been. My concern, and the reason I can't second this not quite motion, but idea to bring this onto the agenda for the next meeting is that I don't feel that mandating signage in businesses is our job. And unfortunately, businesses get to decide what they want to do. And I've been around downtown in several businesses and have seen numerous signs asking for people to wear masks, either explicitly or strongly suggesting it. I don't think that posting a 3-page instructions from the Panhandle Health District that people are going to stop to read it, and business owners that personally don't agree with it are certainly not going to post it. And so in these times that are just so difficult for everybody, regardless of how you feel about the issue, whether you're strongly in support of wearing masks or strongly against it, I don't believe in asking or actually demanding of our businesses to post something is going to change anybody's mind.
Well, and I am planning on visiting businesses on Friday. I usually do before the holidays, and so I'm going to talk to the businesses, but I would concur, Councilwoman Sherman, that that's how the businesses will feel. Some do have signs that say masks are required. Others absolutely will not do it, no matter what we do. And yeah, but I will go talk to them face to face, and I will let you know for sure. I already know what one says.
Mr. Mayor?
Anyone else? Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Then I would like to make a comment or a formal request of our police chief that if we are educating, that I don't believe we are doing a good job. I'd like to lodge a formal complaint that we check in with businesses. There are plenty of businesses in Sandpoint that are not following the Panhandle Health District guidelines. I was downtown in multiple businesses this afternoon, and many people are not wearing masks, which is not going to help our town. And even though we now have a vaccine, it is going to be a very long winter before this is all done and over with. And hopefully by fall, the news is saying that we will maybe get close to back to normal. So I understand that the police chief says he's not getting very many complaints, but I'd like to lodge a formal one, and I will follow up with him at a later time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, council, for your feedback. I'll take that into consideration. Moving on. We'll now proceed with the public forum portion of the meeting, which gives the public the opportunity to address the mayor and city council regarding items listed on the consent calendar or on any general topic not listed on the agenda. Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak during the public forum?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. With that, that concludes the public forum this evening. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar. For the record, the total amount of bills is $1,030,430.04, reflecting $397,245.21 for regular payables and $633,184.83 for payroll. Are there any items council wishes to remove from the consent calendar? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion that the consent calendar be approved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilwoman McAllister?
Yes.
Councilman Espero?
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sherman?
Yes.
Motion passes. As you may have noticed on the agenda, we're taking up new business ahead of old business this evening. And the first item under new business is a presentation and request from Clay Hutchison regarding the Carousel Project. City Administrator Jennifer Stapleton will introduce this item for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clay has been waiting for a few months to come back in and talk with council again about the an idea of having a historic carousel located at one of our parks locations. In our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as council will recall, and public may hopefully be very aware, there are two designated potential locations for a carousel site. One is at City Beach, and the second is before you enter City Beach in the Sand Creek parking lot area, where it's noted that there may be opportunities for recreational and commercial opportunities in that area, and that may be in accordance with the recommendation of our parks master plan consultants, potentially a better location for the terms of economic development in our downtown. So Clay and Reno have been before council before, talking about the carousel, but asked to come back tonight. And now that the parks plan has been adopted, to make a more formal presentation about where they are as an organization and what they see as opportunities, including what other communities have done where cities have partnered with nonprofit groups to bring historic carousels back to life within their community from community activity, recreation, and economic development standpoints. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Clay.
So I would just like to say thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for your time this evening. As the idea of a carousel at the City Beach conjures up all kinds of thoughts, we want to take this opportunity to give you an overview presentation on what is a fairly involved project, and also request approval to work with the various city departments. We are seeking input and ideas and want to determine the city's needs and desires and the requirements and restrictions relative to the City Beach overall, and specifically for the potential of having the carousel in a pavilion at the City Beach. This is important information for us to understand, and it becomes the framework of our feasibility and the comprehensive plan that you all and the public will need to see prior to making any substantive, I knew I was going to struggle with this word, decision. We have lots to share, so let's just jump right in.
So in 1952, at the end of the Kansas State Fair in Hutchinson, Kansas, this carousel was loaded into its two trailers. It was left at a farmer's field, and it remained there for 48 years. In 1973, Butte, Montana. This is where Reno grew up, and she, like many of the residents, were very fond of the Columbia Gardens. This was the gem of Butte. Pavilions, gardens, a few rides. It was a a beautiful spot in an otherwise pretty harsh town. And the carousel was Reno's favorite ride. Tragically, in November 1973, while the carousel was stored in its pavilions, it was completely destroyed by fire. This devastated Reno, but it sparked in her a dream to one day find and restore a Golden Age carousel, bring it to her hometown, which has been Sandpoint since 1981, and recreate some of the magic she enjoyed as a child. Fortunately, she never let go of that dream. In 2000, by sheer happenstance, we found out about a carousel that was languishing in a farmer's field. It had been bought by an Americana collector in the 80s, and his family was now selling off his collection, and this was likely to go to auction. Based on the photographs, Reno realized what we had, and we're a little
We've got a little leg.
lag going on here. I might be going too fast through this. So, anyway, we understood what we had because by 2000, it was completely unlikely there was ever going to find another carousel that hadn't already been discovered. Do we know why the screen's not moving? Melissa?
I can only assume it's trying to catch up.
Oh, geez. There we are. Anyway, we managed to, I think I lost my connection. Ah, great. Yeah, I guess I will proceed without images. So we managed to purchase.
Do you have it in email, Clay?
Not, it's too big to have on an email.
Oh, okay.
So,
If you brought it on that thumb drive we talked about, Clay, I can pop it in and share it if you'd like.
yeah, we could try and do that. I guess I can talk without the images. The images are worth 1,000 words.
Melissa can probably pull it up if you want to.
Yeah, Melissa, it's the PowerPoint one, and I apologize for this. Technology is I'm used to.
You're the first person this has ever happened.
Of course. Yeah.
It's never, oh, that makes us feel a lot better.
Is it the city council?
City Council B, and it's in a PowerPoint
Okay.
kind of thing. Join video. Well, I'll keep going without the images, and at some point we'd love to show the images because that's really worth it. So we were fortunate enough to buy this carousel, and we moved it to our storage barn in New York State, and it stayed there for another 16 years. And in August of 2016, I believe it was, we found out that you all were going to initiate a master plan for the city beach or for the park department. And we had a meeting, I believe in September, with the mayor and with the administrator. And you all kindly advised us that if we could present a credible plan and generate enough public support, that there was a possibility that this project could be considered to go at the city beach. And that was enough for us to launch this project. So we loaded the lowboy trailers, or the 2 trailers, on the lowboys and brought them out to Sandpoint, Idaho. We did that in November of 2016. We had our first event in December at the granary. We called that the unloading event, where for the first time in 64 years, we unloaded this carousel fully from its trailers. We had not unloaded it in the 16 years we had. It was an incredibly magical event. The horses came out of the trailers and all the mechanism pieces came out of the trailers. It was the first time we really had an understanding of what this project was and what we had. And it's the first time we understood that the outside row horses had jewels. It was quite a fancy, much fancier carousel than we thought. We had all the pieces, the sweeps, the rounding boards, all the poles, the gears, the bearings, the whole works were there. We also found 2 crates of 14 interesting art panels. These were painted, we now know they were painted by a woman in the 40s, a well-known woman who signed them, which is incredibly rare to have signed carousel art. And that connection has become a side project and has connected us to a bunch of entities around the country, including the South Street Seaport. turns out that her father was a well-known tattoo artist, and his tattoo artists are in the South Street Seaport Museum. So we're collaborating with the New York South Street Seaport Museum on an exhibition using those panels. It also got us to the Wyeth Foundation, who gave us a grant to restore some of those panels. And those look truly incredible, the three that we've had restored. Some of those panels. And those are truly incredible, the three that we've had restored. We spent 2007, so after the our plan of our, sorry, getting our restoration plan figured out. And we determined that in order to really launch this project, we should probably figure out how to assemble this thing and show it off to the public. So the first thing we did is we had to get the bearings checked out and re-greased and re-lubed and all that kind of stuff. That launched the first of our restoration groups. We call them the Gear and Grease Gang. And so in December of 2000, that launched the first of our restoration on the Gear and Grease. And so
Melissa, can you hear me? I'm getting no more sound.
They look like they're on mute.
I'm not getting anything.
in a more informal setting, but we've had lots of volunteers with some incredible work. So after we unveiled it, we literally had a curtain draw. We had this carousel spinning behind a curtain. We opened the curtain. That was a truly magical moment. We had about 1,000 people come through the fairgrounds in that weekend.
We went to that. Was great.
It was awesome.
So maybe you could go down and help click through it. We're quite a ways past that.
Deb and Shannon, everybody, you can hear us now. Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, that event was magic.
Yeah, so I wish, we will be doing that more with a fully restored carousel. So having compiled a lot of information about our restoration methodologies, we started the restoration in 2017, 2018. And so far we have 11 horses
Let's go back here.
painted.
Clay,
And
we
they
can
are,
go back a little bit and just bring up some of the visuals.
well, if you go down to the, let's go down to the restoration videos.
Okay.
And
Do you want to see the unveiling video?
if you can find that, double click on that and you'll show that. I suppose I can come up and find that. Sorry again, the slightly disjointed nature of this. Yeah.
Actually, let's stop here and we'll start from here. Keep going up just a little bit to the picture of the
Actually,
carousel.
go to this screen right here.
Okay, and I think I can get it up here full screen, so just give me a second.
So we're going to kind of jump around here. But after we unloaded this thing and realized we had a fully intact carousel. So a very important historical fact, due to the abandonment of carousels, fire and the loss of them through natural elements, and the collectible craze that started in the 70s that broke up a lot of carousels because they were more valuable selling the horses off. There are only about 160 of these golden age carousels that still survive out of the 5,000 to 6,000 that were made during the golden age, late 1800s through the 1920s. And we have one of these here in Sandpoint. And furthermore, the fact that we have the mechanism and all the animals together as it was originally made makes it an even rarer carousel. It's truly part of the national collection, will be part of the national collection of safe carousels, and it's kind of a very unique item. So, I don't know, Jennifer, you can scroll down and just peer over your shoulder. But
Do you mind if Clay kind of next to you, Jennifer?
No,
That might
no
be
problem.
easier.
Did we launch it in PowerPoint?
Yeah.
And so so here we are assembling the carousel for that unveiling event. And it's okay. And when that curtain opened, it was, that was a very magical moment. This photo by your own Mary Malone won her an 8 Key Award. So this is our task. This is the carousel, and we're now in the process of fully restoring it. The primary focus on any carousel, of course, is the pony herd. We have 36 of them. 4 stages of restoration to bring them back to life. And the first group is, we call them the Godfather Squad. This is the woodworkers, because we have to disassemble the carousel and take it right down to its laminations, which involve cutting the heads off it. Reno almost passed out when we cut the first head off. We do have to take all the metal off, fit and shape any pieces that are missing, and repair all the cracks and fill the holes. We also have some specialized dentistry that we have to go through. And then we reassemble it using just dowels and glue. There's no metal put back in any of these horses. Lots and lots of sanding and filling, several rounds of primer and what we call the micro filling. And then finally, these horses are ready to turn over to our painters of lost art, who will really bring them back to life. So we conducted a bunch of workshops, painting workshops with Betty Largent. She's one of the foremost carousel horse painters in the country, and fortunately a great resource for us. She's also just recently retired as the curator of the 1908 Louvre Carousel in Spokane. So she has developed techniques specific to carousel animals that are going back on a working machine, very different from if they're going to be in someone's living room. We also have developed a color methodology for the horses depending on where they are in the row and whether they're outside, middle, or inside row horses. It's a collaborative group effort. People work in small teams. They also have the opportunity to work individually and can express a lot of their individual artistic creativity and find ways to take ownership of the work that they are doing on these incredible animals. And we have some cosmetic dentistry as well. So it's been an amazing journey to see these horses come back from their stripped state back to life with quite a sizable group of volunteers that are dedicating some tremendous time and talent to this effort. Going from something like this to this is just magical. And here I'm just going to go through, these are truly works of art. These are the first 11 that we have going on. And I gotta say, our painters are just getting better and better. They keep wanting to redo these horses. We keep telling them, stop, we've got 18 more to go. These are all hand-carved horses, 100 years old. And even though the chariot hasn't been restored yet, one of our artists took upon himself to do what he called a preliminary sketch of the artwork. And that is about the most amazing preliminary sketch I've ever seen.
He's a good painter.
He's a great painter. He is just
He's a good guy.
producing all kinds of stuff for us.
I have a question real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing a lot of local people, Mary, Peter.
Yes, this is all being done by local artisans from Bonner County. You know, a few people from Washington live in Washington as well who were coming over. So everything except for these restoration of these next panels are being done by local artisans, all as volunteers. It's an amazing project. We have a list of about 200 people, and our problem is there's no way we can absolutely use everybody. It's kind of sad, because, you know, but the core group, and it's a side of the core group is just incredible to work with. So these panels, as I mentioned earlier, were done by this woman. So this gives us some of our historical connection. The history of this is a very important aspect. We want to keep propelling the history. You know, our sub-slogan is going to be bringing the past to the present, one ride at a time. This is connected, as I said, to the South Street Seaport Museum and the Wyeth Foundation and entities really all over the country because of this. These are the way the panels look with the varnish that's decayed and yellowed over the years. These are how they look after they've been professionally restored. So these panels are going to create a separate project. They will be available for exhibition and study around the country. So in order to bring life with scenery back to the carousel, we started the art panel project. And these were some of the submissions from some of the artists in the first round. All local artists who just, of their time and talent, submitted these things with the idea that they might have a chance to put their art on the carousel. But instead of picking just 14 panels, we decided after seeing some of these submissions, we couldn't do that. We're remaking the panels. And one of our artists, Danny Knight, has done this incredible design for it. And this will be the frame for the artwork that gets submitted. We will keep this as an ongoing program and literally create a curatable art space that will change its exhibits depending on theme and you know, how we decide to do that. This is actually a really fun part of the project. And it's been generating a tremendous amount of excitement. We probably, I'm sure we'll add an artist in residence component to this and just keep this going. So after the restoration, this is really kind of where you all come into. We've made it no secret that City Beach is our preferred location. And to generate some conversations, some ideas, a number of years ago, I took this picture of the existing building down there, did a little Photoshop magic and dropped in this building. Lots of discussion about skating, so if it would only be so easy to put a skating ring down there, but there's some skating. Add a little bit of night magic. And principally, we feel that you know, summers are going to take care of themselves. You all know that. And the goal is to create synergy and be a catalyst to help the events in the off season. Well, Halloween, the carousel and activities in November, just in October, seem to be kind of a natural fit. November, one of our missions is to help other not-for-profits using the intrinsic excitement of a carousel, help them with their efforts. So November, bring a can to the food to the carousel, get a free ride, help support the food bank. That's just the natural as an idea. Christmas time, holiday magic and carousel magic. You know, don't need to talk much more about that. Wintertime activities, weather gods permitting, you know, we will figure out how to get skating down there. I've heard that maybe in the summer a Friday night food truck was going to be presented somewhere. Well, maybe in the winter that goes to Friday night s'mores around the bonfire. And how nice would it be to expand the winter activities with the you know, the winter carnival down at the beach, right on to bringing back the Easter egg hunt. You know, just about any kind of project, event, you know, with something down there and with the efforts you all are putting in to get that year-round use, you know, we're going to see a lot of activity down there. To get some practical perspective on it, I downloaded the Google map, added some dimensions. So the existing building that's down there, the snack shop, is 92 by 26. The roadway that's in front of it is 50 feet, and that round 60-foot circle is what used to be the kiddie wading pond. It's now some sort of a weird sand pit inside of a ring of trees. This is the footprint.
Cat box.
Cat
box,
box.
Bruce Pond, I'm sure.
I said it first, I didn't.
I'm sure that's destined to be removed. So this is the footprint of the building in Republic, Washington. They have a carousel and a pavilion with some event space. And you know, we were very pleased to have been a small part of the master plan process, and also very pleased to see that the carousel is there as a potential location. We recognize the word potential. And I just, you know, I want to commend you all. This I think, and I've done some planning around the world. This is a dynamic plan. You picked some great consultants. You had a fantastic staff in the Parks Department and in Jennifer pushing this along. And you listened to the public, and I think you guys have created a dynamic plan. And we have an incredibly imaginative community, and if you all continue to set the stage for year-round activity down there, this community is going to fill that stage, and we're certainly hoping to be a catalyst and assist in that effort. But we're not doing this alone. Betty Largent, who is on our board, past president of the NCA, curator recently of the Spokane's Carousel. She's been restoring carousels and working with communities for 45 years. She was one of the original people in the preservation movement that developed at the same time the collecting trade started in the 70s. She's been involved all over the country and internationally doing this. So she knows that the role of a carousel, a great role of a carousel these days, is to support the community in its efforts. And along with being members of the National Carousel Association, we have an association and the cooperations of dozens of projects around the country that are similar to what we're doing here. And so I already have a stack of agreements and lists and plans and ideas. We're going to get a lot of assistance in this. We're not reinventing the wheel. All what we're really doing is tailoring ideas to be specific to Sandpoint for our community, because every community is a little different, and every carousel has a story. Judah Gertson down the Idaho Commission of the Arts. She has told us that she thinks this may be the largest public art project in the state of Idaho. And she certainly is excited about the creative potential and what this carousel can do for our community. So, we expect to get a lot of assistance in developing the plans. And obviously, as we try and create a public-private partnership with you all, we want to hear from the knowledgeable aspects of the city as well as the public as we develop a plan that's going to make some really good sense. This is our first rider. She's now 5 years old, and she reminds us on a continuous basis that it's time to get it done.
Hurry up, Timo.
Hurry up. So I want to thank you on behalf of the herd and for the numerous volunteers that are just enthralled and excited to come to work all the time.
They all wanted to be here tonight.
But when it comes time to make the real decision, we're going to get a bigger haul. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great presentation,
Delete that.
despite the challenges that.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for your patience with us for that.
No problem. So I'd like to open this item up for discussion and questions. So, the general thrust here is what's being requested is that that we grant this staff permission to go ahead and develop a plan for how the carousel could be integrated into our park system. Do I have that right? Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
So I'd open up the floor to any council members that want to comment at this time.
That was a great presentation. That was cool. I love to see the local community aspect to that, seeing those faces, and I mean, it's really amazing. That was
Yeah,
cool.
and obviously we're dealing with COVID, but we will be getting back to having the public able to come into the studio while people are working. Right now we are practicing our social distancing, and we just have a very few people working on stuff, and we usually come in very small groups. But before this, when we had people coming in, that's part of the. We have a couple more years to go in this restoration, and we want to get a lot of people through and see it.
I can really appreciate the dream that you've put forth and you've worked towards, and it's great for me to be around people that have this big dream and watch them work through it. Both of you, as well as the sticking the landing with that. This is going to be one of the biggest art exhibits in the state of Idaho. That's a big statement, and I think that as a statement shows it's not just an art exhibit where we have some local artists that come together and for a week this is going to be an exhibit. This is the entire state, and how many artists have contributed to this, how many skilled, just amazing dreamers, and this is ours. It's our communities. It's not going to pick up and leave somewhere. It's not going to go to Boise one weekend. It could be ours. So
Yeah,
I
it's a
really
gem for
appreciate-
Sandpoint.
Pardon me?
It's a gem for Sandpoint.
Absolutely. In the gem state.
In the gem state.
Just as an aside, the NCA is planning to bring their once a year convention to the Northwest in either 23 or 24. And we've committed that we'll have the carousel up and running. It may not be in a pavilion, we're not sure, that's kind of, but it was a traveling carousel. So that's our target. It has this substantially available to reassemble in its restored state so we can help host that convention.
I don't want to do that though. It's a lot of work to put that
Yeah, but it'll
together.
be a lot of
And
fun.
now the horses are painted, so it's scarier.
I'll confess, going down to Coeur d'Alene, just seeing the carousel, to me, I'm like, my kids want to do it. I was like, whatever, honestly. But I liked how theirs was, assuming that's similar to covered, how you guys envision.
We envision that it'll have to be in a covered building. Yeah.
Is that
Climate
similar to
control.
Coeur d'Alene?
Kind of. Coeur d'Alene is a much smaller carousel. It's
Okay.
24 horses.
Same
It's more of
idea.
a kid carousel. And one of the things that I actually we would find unfortunate is they were very limited. They don't even have bathrooms in that building.
Right.
And so they're not operational in the winter. It's just summer. It's just literally a ride. I mean, it's a fantastic carousel and has a lot of history in Coeur d'Alene. But we have a much more substantial carousel that I think can do a lot more for our community, as long as we give it the space that will allow it to fulfill its potential for the community.
But seeing my kids' smiles
Yeah.
and, coming into it, I'm like, yeah, whatever. But being there, I found myself wanting to do it again with them, just from the
Right.
joy that I saw with my children. So I was really captivated by that. And also, I couldn't tell there was a carousel there. Even with the noise, I heard some people complain about possible noise pollution. But really, it was, with all the hustle and tussle, you couldn't really tell there was even a carousel there
And
with the noise.
there's
So.
terrific ways to mitigate
Right.
the noise, if you will, especially if it's in an enclosed building.
Right, and so
that can-
that's not a concern to me, and I just want to say that I thought my kids really enjoyed it, and I can see that being a great potential as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I love it, but you know that.
I'd like to make a comment if I could. I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the time and effort and, reaching out on a national level and the research that you've done and how you found all this. It went from a small, tiny little dream, it looks like, to just kept blossoming and growing like a giant sunflower. So well done effort. I think it will bring beautiful things to Sandpoint, more than I think could have been originally anticipated. So
Thank you.
May I make a suggestion that you might have already thought of, but wherever it is, however it is, put in a plaque of your story, your dream. I mean, I have 3 daughters that
I would love to have that. It's part of the history of the carousel, and the story is even bigger than what we were able to share here tonight. And I think to keep that history with the carousel so that people can read that and really understand truly how magical this is, it is important. I would love to be able to have that and have that history for people to read and to get that feeling.
Yeah, even a video, while it's
A video is a
going,
good idea.
I have 3 daughters, and to show them that you can,
Yeah.
We've also
You can
often
dream and do it.
been surprised by how many carousels that we see around the country that don't really talk about the history.
Yeah, that's surprising, and I always want to know more about them, and so I think to not have that is a loss.
Yep, so.
Mhm.
Sure you thought about it, but that's one thing that I think would be important.
I love that you reiterated it,
Mhm.
thank you.
Anything else?
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, it sounds like we have general consensus.
Shannon wanted to say.
Shannon, go ahead, please.
Just a short point. I just wanted to say thank you for sharing just such a beautiful story and it's an amazing vision. I'm just excited for my family and all the families in Sandpoint to be able to experience what the future holds at City Beach, hopefully. So I wish you luck. I'm excited that our staff is going to be looking into this, and thank you for coming and sharing everything.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just have one more.
Yeah.
You said about 2 years before completion. Is that a rough idea?
That's rough. I honestly think it may be just a little bit longer, especially with the COVID. Everything's kind of slowed down, although we are still working and we're
Right.
getting a lot of work done. It has slowed things down just a little bit, but I've got to say our volunteers are like, I don't even know how to describe them. They're so excited about this project that we can't hardly hold them back. I imagine reins being held, and I'm always like jerking on the reins and trying to direct them to slow them down just a little bit. The excitement and the energy that is going into this it's hard to kind of keep that down. 2 years might be a little aggressive, but I don't think it'll be a whole lot longer than
I
that.
guess one thing I'm thinking is coinciding with, not to get too far ahead, put the cart before the horse, but so obviously we have our master plan, that costs money. This is a great idea. How would we coincide that, say, we don't raise the funds to do what the future master plan is right away, but they're ready, say we decide to do it, does that have to be completed, or say,
I think we would look at this and come back again as a phased element potentially. So as we're moving forward with further vetting the plans for particularly City Beach, or outside of that with Sand Creek, looking at phasing with that and confirming designs and costs are next steps we're planning after the first of the year. I think it is worth noting quickly, Clay, maybe some of the different models that are used in terms of city and carousel partnerships
Sure.
and how those are structured.
So we're a 501c3, and we intend, with high hopes, that we will actually be raising the money for, obviously the restoration, but also for the pavilion, at least certainly the carousel aspects of the pavilion, if not a bigger partnership. And we do think that's achievable. So sometimes Parks Departments own the carousel. That is not what we want to pursue. We don't feel that we should try and burden your Parks Department with understanding carousels, and it's not really what you do. So more typically, the successful ones you've seen is when a 501c3 takes ownership and management of the carousel and its pavilion, at least those aspects of it. And they create a lot of events because one wants to keep this thing self-supporting. We do, there's no project that wants this to be a drain on the taxpayers. You get into it, much better if it doesn't happen. So there's certain events and things like that and ways you can go about that keeps the interest alive. We think the art panel project is one that will keep it fresh and things like that. And I don't believe any carousel has done that around the country. So very often it's a 501c3 that has sort of a ground lease, and the building that is built on top of the city land oftentimes is owned by the city. Then it's certainly isn't owned by anybody other than the city, even though the carousel entity or the 501c3 may have paid for substantially. So you get into some fairly standard leases and a lot of what ifs on what happens if 20, 30, 40, you guys think in a very longer time frame you have to. What happens if in 40 years, no one likes carousels anymore, and there's always exit strategies. But it's typically a ground lease with a lot of operational spelled out on who's doing what and things like that. So, and there's a lot of different models that we can draw from.
And we have a lot of people that are ready they're kind of standing in line to come in and tell their stories. So when the time is right, we can line up those people or their stories and bring them in and share, expound on that a little bit more, share more about how those partnerships are working.
I mean, just reasonably locally, the Tri-Cities has a carousel. We've been working with them, and they have probably one of the most dynamic carousel projects in the way they operate and they're self-sustaining. And the people that are running that carousel, as well as city council members, they call themselves city council, down there, we've talked to, and they're willing to come up and chat and share their experiences and their knowledge at the appropriate time. The Louvre Carousel in Spokane is a Parks Department owned carousel, and that presents some different kind of challenges that operation, but there's that resource. And then the various carousels in Montana. Butte has got a carousel that they just opened that has kind of a similar model in terms of a 501c3 that helped was the catalyst of rebuilding a city park for year-round use. That's we're tied with those people, and Missoula and Helena and Republic, Washington, and just about a number of ones that have similar models will be able to work in.
Awesome.
That's great. Thank you. Anyone else? Clerk, is there anyone online that would like to comment on this issue from the public?
I'm not seeing anyone, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. It sounds like we have general support from council to move forward, to direct staff to move forward with developing a series number of proposals for this project. So moving on. The next item under new business is a proposed resolution approving the Baldy Mountain Communications Site Lease Policy. Contract Procurement Officer Sir Cheryl Hughes will provide a brief presentation regarding this proposed new policy. Cheryl's with us online.
Yes, can you
Was
hear
here,
me?
Cheryl? Yep, we
Yes.
can hear you fine.
Okay, so you can hear me fine. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Before you this evening is a new formal policy for the city's Baldy Mountain Communication Site leases. This presentation will provide you a high-level overview of the policy. If I can just get my screen to switch, will be good. Okay, so the Baldy Mountain Communication Site, the City of Sandpoint's Baldy Mountain Communication Site Lease Program is meeting the demand for communication site availability for placement of buildings and towers that are suitable for AM, FM, and broadcast radio, television, microwave radio, and cellular and wireless broadband applications. With an elevation of 6,253 feet, Baldy Mountain overlooks transportation routes and population areas, representing in many cases a great opportunity for a communication site and is a valuable asset for our community. Baldy Mountain comprises about 560 acres, and private and public agency sectors recognize the value of Baldy Mountain, where the demand has grown over the years. So why a policy and how was it developed? So first, why? City staff recognize the importance and long-term value that an established lease policy will have. Having a formalized policy ensures that all lessees are following the same guidelines, rules, and regulations. And it will assist the city in more efficient and effective management of the communication site. So how was it developed? City staff researched best practices in other government agencies throughout the region and ultimately utilized the state of Idaho's ADAPA section 20.03.14, the rules which includes rules for communication site leases, and with permission, the state of Washington's Department of Natural Resources communication sites lease rent schedule. And these were both used as models to build from and develop our policy. The policy rent schedule was developed from the Washington Department of Natural Resources structure as well. And it helps us be more in line with current market rates. So the policy overview, guidelines within this policy are also in an updated lease agreement template that was reviewed and approved by legal counsel. So the different sections within this policy are covered in this presentation, and then a little summary within each of the sections. So the first section is occupancy, which covers lease termination, the lessee acceptance of the current site conditions, the potential implications of a failure to vacate if the lease is terminated, and the lessee responsibilities for any subletting of space at the leased site. The next section is the use of the site, which covers what the permitted use of the site is and the right of the city to inspect the site. The next area is payment, and this covers the rent payment obligations, a rental deposit that's required, and that is something new. There has not previously been a rental deposit. It also includes a road use fee, an annual rent adjustment for leased sites. It covers sublessee rent, and responsibilities of utility payments are on the lessees. The next section is special requirements. Within this section, it covers the compliance that's required on all laws and the lessee's responsibilities to obtain any required permits. It covers the obligation of lessees to help protect the site from fire, property damage, including vandalism, and to notify the city. In addition, if it's a fire, they are supposed to also, within the policy, contact the fire department. Lessee's obligation to avoid any frequency interference with other leased sites on the property. The obligation to notify the city of any new equipment that's brought onto the site, and the obligation to operate with an FCC license and provide the city with a copy of that FCC license. The last area is the lessee's obligation to ensure that no hazardous, toxic, or harmful substances are brought onto the site, and requires the lessee to notify appropriate agencies and the city in the event of any spill or contamination of any hazardous, toxic, or harmful substances that may have been brought on the site, even though it states. The next section is the assignment, insurance, and indemnity section. And it covers if a lessee is subletting of the site, that it requires city notification and approval of the sublease. It covers the insurance requirements and requires the lessee to provide the city with a copy of the insurance certificate, and the city being named as an additional insured as well, and then provides indemnification language. The next area is a section on default and covers the lessee breach of a lease agreement, the city's right to enter and remove property if defaulted, the lease agreement termination due to a default, and if the lessee is insolvent, that is also considered a default. The next area is the access roads and road maintenance, and this covers the city maintenance of the road to the site. It also includes that there will be no maintenance during seasonal conditions that impair the road, and that there will be no snow plowing or snow removal service provided by the city on the road. It also provides notification to lessees of potentially seasonally impaired site access limitations. It lets the lessees know their responsibility for any road repairs if the road is damaged by the lessee. And if there are any road improvements requested and constructed by the lessee, the city must approve it, and it is at the lessee's expense. The next section is for any improvements on the site, and that it requires notification and approval by the city for any improvements on the site. The last section is the miscellaneous section, which just covers liens, the preservation of survey markers that are up there, and public disclosure notice. From there, the policy then goes into the communication site rent, and the rent structure is broken up into 3 rental classifications. And the 3 classifications are all entities other than those listed below, which is a 501c3 charitable organization, for example, like KSPS, PBS, which is up at the site currently, and a federal, state, or local government agency. Within those 3 rental classifications, the structure of the rent includes a base amount for land area being leased up to 2,500 square feet, per square foot amount for each square foot over 2,500, plus a per unit rate for each radio unit that's at the site. So that's how the rental part of those classifications are broken out. And then it covers the rental adjustment, which is set at 2% each year, and a road use fee adjustment with a maximum increase of up to 5% per year. And then it has the cellular and wireless broadband rent, and that is also the same annual rent adjustment of 2%. That presentation, is there any questions that council may?
I have a question. Has there never been a policy before?
No, there has not. This is the first policy for the Baldy Mountain Communication Site Lease Program.
Huh, okay. And is there a finite number of people, of entities that can be there? I'm just curious, all of a sudden I had a vision of just Everybody crammed in there.
Right now, we know that it's 560 acres. And right now there's lots of space available. At some point, yes, you're going to reach your maximum, depending on how much land area each lessee is looking for.
Thank you.
And the road use fee, the rent fee, and all those fees are on the fee schedule.
Correct. They're all part of the fee schedule.
Does that mean they're part of the current fee schedule or the new fee schedule?
They're going to be part of the new fee schedule.
Okay, so how much will the current lessees, how much will their payments be changing?
Some of the, right now we're working with a surveyor to get land area square foot for each lessee that is currently up there. But for example, one of the lessees that's up there, it's looking like it will be roughly, depending on their expansion and the number of radio units they use, it could be about 2,000 more per year for them. And in the case of another lessee that's a government agency, their rent will be a little less than they're currently paying with the government rate structure. And another lessee, it will increase about $1,000 a year. It's another private entity.
Thank you.
And part of that is the road use fee. That is a new fee, but roads need to be maintained. There needs to be some fee to help with that, and that is a best practice in communication site leases, is to have a road use maintenance fee.
Cheryl, if I can add to that, we have had no policy relative to maintenance up there, and as Cheryl's had alluded, this has been another kind of one of our cleanup items. We've had no policy and standards for how to manage these, and this has actually been a project that Cheryl's been leading for us for about the last year. We made a trip up there one day, the chief, Cheryl, and I, because there's a lot of our emergency communications equipment is up there. We have equipment and the county does as well, predominantly the county, but we really weren't even clear as to who was up there or what the condition was. So when we went up there, we have structures, building structures, we have tower structures that entities have occupied in the past, and then they have quit using our area up there, and we're left with the structures up there, as well as the towers. We have subleasees who are up there that we weren't aware were up there, that were subleasing from other entities, and then the primary entity that they've been leasing from is either moved on or is looking at building a new structure. And so now we're left with figuring out what we're doing with the subleasee and a structure that is already up there. The road to the Baldy site is it is a trip and an adventure getting up there. As we got digging into that, the road for a significant amount of the way up there, we're crossing Department of Land's property. And we actually have a lease for the road, and the terms of our lease require that we maintain the road. We have not done so in years. And what really kind of kicked this off about 18 months ago is we had leasees up at the site saying the road is really impassable and it's dangerous. And Department of Lands also contacted us and put us on notice that we needed to do some maintenance of the road. we aren't recovering any of those costs from the leasees, and it is a requirement of us to maintain the road in accordance with our lease. Our lease with Department of Lands for use of that road is coming up for renewal, and we're in a difficult position given that we have not maintained the road. So this gives us a plan moving forward for a funding source for that maintenance. And Amanda's also working up a plan to actually accomplish that maintenance. So at the time we were apprised by Department of Lands that we weren't effectively maintaining the road, it put us in the position of looking, do we pull from our street dollars to maintain the road going up to this communication site that, again, we're really not using. Staff had not been up to the site until this first came up in several years. So we, as Cheryl mentioned, have a surveyor who has been up there who has helped us to really narrow down where the outlines of the property are, what are the areas that are taken up by current leases. And so this is somewhat of a cleanup process. We did debate because we've had existing leases, we have renewing leases, and we have some new leases that are potentially coming through, what to do with, again, the road, and that being an additional cost for leases. But it is the leases that are using the road, and in order for us to have a site to provide for leases, we have to maintain it in accordance with the provisions of our lease agreement with Department of Lands.
Very well. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you talk about there are leftover equipment, et cetera, I'm sorry, I read through this once, but so is it in the policy that whoever, if they vacate the property, they have to take care of their equipment, like take the tower or the debris or?
Pack it in, pack it out.
Yeah, pack it in, pack it out.
Yes, there is. And it also states that, and that's where the rental deposit comes in. If they, obviously there is absolutely language in there about they're required to remove their equipment. It gives timeframes. If they don't, the city can go in and remove it, and the rental deposit then essentially becomes that of the cities to recoup the cost for us having to remove that equipment.
Great. Yeah, it was right in front of my face, and I just
Oh,
totally
it's
missed
fine,
it.
it's fine.
Yeah. And how long have we owned that property? Forever.
Since the beginning of time.
Interesting. Okay.
So I just want to say thanks to Cheryl.
Yeah.
This either is a mess or had a potential to be a mess. And so it was a great catch, and
Yeah.
really appreciate it was a great presentation, very thorough. And the citizens of the city, thank you for your hard work.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Deliver packages up there, right?
Oh, boy. We have stories for days, people.
We're not plowing it.
We know.
So
Thank
the
you.
portion of the policy will be discussed during the future public hearing, but if there are any members of the public who'd like to comment on any other portion of the policy aside from the fee schedule, please raise your hand on Zoom.
I'm not seeing anyone, Mr. Mayor.
Nobody wants to comment. I would entertain a motion to,
There's a gentleman right there on the screen.
Oh,
He had his hand raised.
Mr. Reeves.
Hello, Mayor and Councilman. My only comment there is that since I've done a lot of these in a lot of states, and you're discussing road maintenance, one thing you may want to discuss with your entities and your rental is that a lot of people are upgrading their fiber to these tower sites. And one of the things you may think about is if somebody does, make sure that they put in enough conduits when they rip that road that one time or rip right beside it to allocate enough duct space through one dig rather than having somebody come in every other year or every 5 years with a new request to put new cable or new fiber up there. Just a thought.
Great suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution for the Baldy Mountain Communication Site lease policies. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Sparrow,
Yes.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilman Groot,
Yes.
Councilwoman Sherman,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule.
Yes.
Motion passes. The final item under new business is a decision on scheduling a public hearing for proposed new fees. City Administrator Jennifer Stapleton will provide a presentation for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief with this. Pull this up real quick so that it is in front of you. Here we go. What we are asking tonight is for council to schedule a public hearing to consider adoption of the fees that are included in the Baldy Mountain Site Lease Program and Policy as presented by Cheryl and adopted by council. You will note we have an extra fee included in this as well. As part of our cleanup again, we have in our city code under city code 3-11-6, our business licensing code, a late fee for business licenses in the code, but it has never been adopted as on our formal fee schedule. So typically as we're going through and working through cleanup on items, we're identifying these things and we try not to bring them forward individually. We try to include them when we're bringing something else forward because when we are scheduling a public hearing, it does require notification and publication in the newspaper, which is an expense to the city. So we typically save these things for when we are doing a publication. But again, that is an already identified fee in our current city code, but it has just not been adopted as a part of our city fee schedule.
Okay. Any questions? So public comments on that item will be reserved for the public hearing. I would entertain a motion to schedule a public hearing for January 6, 2021, regular meeting to take public testimony on these proposed new fees. Is there a motion? So moved. It's been moved. Was there a second?
I don't know, Shannon.
Was there a second?
Shannon's frozen.
Second.
Okay, there's a second. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Deb.
Any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilwoman Rule,
Yes.
Councilman Sparrow,
Yes.
Councilwoman Sherman,
Yes.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilman Groot.
Yes.
Motion passes. The first item under old business this evening are 3 items related to watershed protection and access. Infrastructure and Development Services Manager Amanda Wilson will get us kicked off with a presentation on the proposed addition to City Code and the accompanying procedures. Amanda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, City Council. So tonight's old business is, yes, all about watershed for the most part. Tonight's requested actions really mark a significant milestone. After nearly a year, much progress has been made on the city's strategic priority and initiative that was really a direction to staff to come forth with an overall plan for how to have a master plan within the city watershed, specifically city-owned property. And so tonight we are, as the mayor has mentioned, we are bringing forward 3 separate but closely related items for your consideration, all of which are really centered around protecting and preserving the city-owned land around Little Sand Creek. Little Sand Creek currently serves, as all of you know, as a drinking water source, not only for the city of Sandpoint, but for all of our water users in the area. So it expands beyond our city limits in that regard. As we discussed at prior meetings, our management strategy in the past for the watershed has largely focused on limiting access by the general public due to just the sensitive nature of our drinking water source and the various risks associated with any large area of land in a forest. This approach is not inconsistent with how many owners of surface water sources respond to mitigating those risks. That said, we all also know that limiting access to over 4,000 acres of land can be challenging. And so tonight, we're presenting our plan that is really trying to find a balance to protect the water while also allowing opportunities for other public uses as city council may or may not deem appropriate in the future. Some of those uses may include recreation on the land, which we know is already occurring. And to that end, I'm really excited to have our consultants on board with us tonight, Reeve Sherwood, Randy Reeve, and Point Environmental, Mike. They're going to assist us, or have been assisting us, on this entire path forward. So Randy and Michael are both online with us. They're really going to focus on item 8C this evening, which is the management plan itself. But I think it's important to mention them now because they've worked really diligently and extensively to, over the course of the last year, to not only meet with multiple stakeholders and perform site visits, as they'll speak more specifically to here in the next few items, but through that effort, it became clear that if we're going to have a management plan, it was critical to those planning efforts that we formally solidified and provided an action for enforcing. And that brings us to item 8A, which is a request for action for a new city code. That said, I need to pause for a moment and confess that I misspoke at our November 4th meeting when I introduced this subject to you, which may have caused a little confusion in the packet. I told you that we do not have a city code regarding the watershed, and that was not accurate. We in fact do, and I apologize for that. I was working on an unrelated matter, and I actually found in Title 9, Chapter 4, in our residential zoning district code, a sandwich between multifamily and rural residential, that we have a very small code. I'm glad you're giving me that pause look because I was feeling pretty guilty for missing this, called the Watershed Protection Zone. So the zone in the code that are included currently, they reference a map of Little Sand Creek. So it is in a bit odd location. And I think there's 2 points that are worth noting beyond it being in an odd location, that although it's well-intentioned, the current code is substantially incomplete. It just doesn't address all the aspects that we know today need to be mitigated and addressed. And then number 2 is more of a legal matter to some degree. And that is the Idaho Code Title 67 zoning ordinances. This gets into the weeds a bit, but basically it enables the city to adopt a zoning ordinance. Doesn't enable, it actually requires that we have zoning ordinances for our jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is within our city boundaries. The watershed is not within our city boundaries, and the zoning code is not the appropriate location for such regulations. So I think that's important to note because 1, I was wrong, so I'm admitting that, and 2, that's why in your council packet you now see a request to repeal section 9-4-3, which is this water protection zone code that's in there. So with that said, Idaho Code absolutely does allow for us to control and regulate and administer the land that we own, regardless if it's whether or not it's within our city boundaries. It's just not by way of zoning in the traditional form. So we are proposing, and as you've seen already, that the proposed location actually be within public ways and property, because it's property that we own by the public. And that is known as Chapter 16, is the proposed new code. So again, the code is really necessary and serves as the foundation for us implementing our overall management strategy. It gives us the authority to do that and really is the enforceable mechanism of this entire effort that we've been working so hard on. So that's why we're beginning with the code. And I think that it's also important to note that the current code references a resolution 4791 that I mentioned in the staff report. And I'm not going to take a deep dive into it, but I do think it's valuable to note that it is an agreement that we entered into with multiple other public agencies to collaborate on land use within the watershed. So not only our own land, but their land that is owned by various entities such as the Bureau of Land Management, as well as the Department of Lands, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, as well as the Division of the Environment. And so it is a 30-year-old document. Much of it is still relevant today. And I would say that in general, agreements such as this are the best way for us to help influence how our adjacent property owners in the watershed are managing their land We've had multiple conversations with these various agencies, and I can say with confidence they share our goals in the watershed overall and overarching. So I am confident that over the years we'll be able to continue working with them. We all generally agree that this document could use some fine tuning and maybe replacement with different memorandums of understanding. So I thought it was important to note that because this document is important. It currently serves as our basis for what is allowed and not allowed in the watershed, and it's currently referenced within the zoning code. So all of that technicality aside, we published the draft code on November 18th to City Council as well as to the public. So it's been about a month. We have received some feedback. I wouldn't say it's an overwhelming amount of citizen engagement on that. But even as recently as this week, after posting the final draft for City Council, we have made some minor grammatical and some other contributions to it that I've highlighted in red, and just wanted to show you those proposed changes tonight. And also some of the more significant edits that were made since that original post on November 18th. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Maybe. Okay, so this is the ordinance that was included in your packet, and any changes since that posting on Monday have been highlighted in red. The first, I think, is important to note. Since the original publication of this draft, we simplified a bit the section on regulated activities. It was a bit wordy unnecessarily, and provided some terms such as you couldn't store fuel within 250 or more than 250 gallons, something of that accord. We're saying we don't want storage of fuel at all, regardless of quantity. There were some references to acreage. Acreage really kind of became irrelevant in a further review. The scale of the matter didn't make it regulate the need to regulate versus not. So those provisions have been taken out where applicable. And then in addition, we added hunting, horseback, campfires, and camping. The red is the piece that was changed again since you saw it on Monday, most likely. And the reason for this is I want to spend just a bit of time talking about this because we get a lot of questions about hunting, particularly in the watershed, and I can understand why. So this is saying that, yes, it's a regulated activity, meaning that you can't do it without authorization. And furthermore, it's not implying that you can come get a permit from the city right now to start hunting in our watershed. We actually, and it's item 3 this evening, we'll be talking about our overall management plan. One of the actions proposed in that management plan is that the city collaborate actually with Fish and Game and talk about, because they're truly the experts on that matter, if we were going to allow hunting on our land, what would that look like? What would that not look like? And fundamentally, they're the entity that issues, as we all know, hunting license and manages that for us in our entire state, even including on property that would be owned by the city. So I just didn't want you to think we were going to start processing hunting permits as a result of this addition. And the same goes with camping and some of these other activities that are listed in the regulated use. It's not saying that you can't do them. It's just saying you can't do them without our authorization. And that we need to evaluate in detail if we're going to allow any of these activities or uses in the watershed. And then we've tried to further clarify a couple areas. I think the wording needed a bit of fine tuning when it comes to the activities that the city's doing, sorry for the scrolling here, versus what we're not allowing others to do. So up above in regulated activities, that's where you can apply, for a permit, we can consider that use. And then I've separated the section now into non-restricted, no permit required. That is a shorter section now, trying to clarify that if you're a hiker or a mountain biker just out using an established trail that's already been permitted and authorized by the city, you don't need an individual permit, right? This isn't the Grand Canyon where you have to apply to be able to access our land. That's not the intent here. So that's the purpose of section 716.7. And then below 716.8 is saying these things are restricted. However, no permits required, and the reason no permits required is because they're generally performed by the city or someone we've hired or the state. And it's talking about, things like law enforcement, wildland fire mitigation, those sort of things. You do not need IDL does not need a permit from us to go and fight a fire before they fight a fire. So that's what we're trying to get at here. But it's also what you'll notice is the forest management when it comes to, let's say, timber harvesting. That's not a regulated activity that you could come and apply for a permit with the city. If we're going to be doing any harvesting in our watershed, that's something the city initiates and that we contract with somebody to do because it's arguably one of the higher risk activities that we would have with equipment and road building and that sort of thing. It also further requires permits from the Idaho Department of Lands to do any forest practice in our watershed. And so that was an activity that we're proposing we conduct. Same with like noxious weed control. We're not going to allow someone else to come in and put in chemicals in our watershed. We would initiate that. So we made a few changes there on punctuation and grammar that I much appreciate. We also added, I thought this was a really important comment received by a citizen. And that was to be a little bit more broad in what we're saying when it comes to performance bonds as well as damage or mitigating for damage and reporting. So we previously said at the bottom, the last sentence there of section 716.13, that the city may also require as a part of a performance bond, an additional amount necessary to clean up or mitigate the effects of, and we said spill, release, or discharge. What we've now added is damage. There might be other things that's broader than we can contemplate at this point, damage that should be included. And so I really appreciated that citizen's comment and have incorporated it in both that section as well as the contaminated facilities area where we're saying that if you've done damage, you need to tell us you've done damage. And I think that summarizes the changes that were made. I will say we've had a few comments, and I can appreciate them and understand, regarding penalties and violations and why the types of violations have not been listed here. What is it that we mean by violations? And there's a very strategic reason why we didn't list them. It's quite simply because they're too broad. If you fill in the waters of the US, that's a federal violation and would be regulated and enforced by the feds. If you trespassed on our land in an area that we said you shouldn't trespass, well, then that's a completely different violation and handled actually by Bonner County, typically. If you start a fire intentionally in our watershed, that also has some very different criminal implications. And so we could have gone on and that value isn't really there, given that we have other laws that provide for those types of violations. So this is more just saying, hey, there are consequences. So that in essence is the summary of the proposed City Code Title 7, Chapter 16. And I would certainly entertain any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
The only question I had was about campfires and you put it in.
Sure. I have to say that was a recommendation by a citizen, so I don't get any credit for it.
He's one of the firefighters, so I'm like, what is that campfire?
Yeah.
Amanda, that last point you made was a really good one, but I'm just thinking, a lot of those are regulated or enforced by, say, other agencies, but some of those that are restricted by us, I don't know, maybe it's a question, maybe they do call for a specified consequence. I'm looking for an example of something, walking or hiking or biking not on a permitted trail, for instance. Right? That's kind of one of those, how do we manage that?
It's a great question, and you bring up a really, really good aspect of, or end point of this entire effort. We've had many conversations, not only with Randy and Mike, but as well with Chief Kuhn. He's actually had conversations with the Bonner County Sheriff's Department and some other enforcement agencies about how do we go about enforcing and what does enforcement look like. My conclusion with that and my answer to you based upon all of those conversations is that our management plan is really where the details of that start to become ironed out with specific actions. Chief Kuhn specifically, him and I discussed, if we had someone in the example that you referenced there, that there are various laws that they can apply at that time to address that violation, such as trespassing. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward one. It's our property, and if you're using it in a manner that we've signed and not authorized, that one's straightforward. But you know, if we have somebody camping up there and we don't allow camping, that kind of falls under another provision. I am certainly not an expert on law enforcement. I know Chief was planning to be here tonight, so I apologize. I am not able to get into more specifics than that, but I will say that we've coordinated and we do intend to have an enforcement presence, much of which is likely going to be educational as well as just more frequent monitoring. Those are a lot of the conversations we've had at a leadership level to implement this plan that we're proposing. So I hear you. Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and so with the violations, that blanket term, like I could understand the citizen bringing up the question, like, okay, well, what are you guys gonna do? Like, what's gonna happen to me? And this, like, oh, this violation, oh, what are you gonna do? But this will be a 1,000-page document if we do a what-if-isms for all of these different things. So I can understand, and hopefully the citizens also understand that as we're moving this forward, this document forward, this violations, it will get vetted out, and there's are other things. And this lane of educate rather than inform, it's great, especially with our police force.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that.
Is there any other questions from council? Okay. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on this?
I'm not seeing anyone, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I will now read the title of the
Oh,
ordinance.
wait, one moment, Mr. Mayor, we have a
Okay.
hand being raised here. Steve Holt.
And Steve, if you can keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, that'd be great. I know that's going to be tough.
Okay, I think I can do that. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first, I want to thank the council and staff for, putting the effort into doing as much as we can to protect our watershed. And I guess I just, to try and keep it under 3 minutes here, I'll just, and thank you to Amanda too for walking me through some of this this morning and clarifying some of the language for me. I really appreciate that. I did have one sort of comment on regulated activities 7-16-2. And, as we said, these are activities that, are permitted with a permit. And as you can see, you run down the line and you've got excavation and some of these other things. And then you get halfway down the page and item E says any of the activities, regardless of the amount of acreage affected, if such activities are located within 150 feet. And so I'm just wondering, since there was no real acreage sort of discussed, around the other activities, I was assuming you'd need a permit whether you did those activities anywhere within the watershed. And so in that way, that would actually be somewhat redundant. Or if there was some other meaning that I'm not understanding there, but it was a little confusing for me. And then I think, as Amanda was also talking about some of the, like the hunting and actually getting a permit for that type of use. I also look at item H as being something that where it says dumping, depositing, or discharging any pollutant into any water course may have the potential to be permitted. Not that I don't think that our staff now or our council would ever permit the depositing or discharging of a pollutant in a water course, but you know, looking down the line, we never know. So I guess as just a suggestion, I wonder if there wouldn't be another section that just identified prohibited uses unless otherwise authorized by the city, and then listed some of those things on this list that we actually really don't want to happen there. And then I guess under 716 -8, which is the restricted uses, I think item C, it talks about noxious weed and insect control. And I think that would be primarily noted to be herbicide spraying, but there's no real setback, you know, identified there. And so I'm wondering if there is one, if that's something that's going to be identified in the watershed management plan. And I think basically there were a couple of things on the code that we're going to repeal 943 that seem like, if, for example, the herbicide, there were no chemical applications allowed within 100 feet. So there were some very specific call outs in 943 that seemed like they would be appropriate to make sure that we incorporate. And if they are incorporated in the management plan, then that solves the issue there. And I think that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Those are great suggestions or comments. We really appreciate that. Amanda, do you want to comment on any of this?
Sure, I'm happy to. And thank you, Steve. I appreciate you chiming in and for the conversation and time you spent with this. I'll start from the beginning. When the provision is referring to any activities, item E, any activities regardless of the amount of acreage affected if such activities are located in or within 150 feet of the water course. The intent here is, in short words, trying to say nothing. No activity within 150 feet should occur without a permit. So we really don't want anyone around our water courses without a permit. That's what that's trying to say, arguably in a lot of words. So I'm happy to edit it if it's unclear, or if that explanation is sufficient, then certainly happy to leave it. As far as the prohibited, I certainly can understand that perspective. It is a tough balance to the thinking around this, and the balance that we were trying to achieve is not being able to foresee every request that comes to us. And the word pollutant is rather broad. So I agree, the idea of us allowing someone to dump a bunch of chemicals or something obvious into a water course, we would not permit. And I don't, if it implies that we would, then by all means, we should consider changing it. That's not the intent. The intent is that there may be a pollutant, because that term is so broad that if it's discharged, then maybe a permit would be appropriate. I will say that any discharge into a waterway, we don't get to solely regulate. And so that would be a combined effort with the federal and state agencies that go with that. So I feel like we're well suited, but I'm certainly happy to entertain any proposed changes that you may have. And then last, but certainly not least, the questions regarding noxious weeds and insect controls and some of those other more specific details included in the current code. The answer is yes. We have a lot more detail in our very long management plan. I say long, but it's very, I think it's really good too. So it provides that detail that I think is maybe on the surface missing in this code. And I realize the public hasn't seen that management plan yet. So.
And finally, he had the comments a little more general, but around repealing 943. That there were maybe some additional protections in there that may do well to carry over into this plan. Steve, if you're still with us, maybe you can provide a little more specificity there. If you, I don't recall, you did give us one specific example, but I'm interested to hear your feedback on what you think may serve us well to carry forward from 943. Are you there?
Well, there was basically there's some, the waste disposal piece that Amanda spoke of is item number 2. Although that is covered, but, and I guess the chemical application was the one that sort of jumped out at me. And then, Amanda, we discussed this morning how this is only within the jurisdiction on city-owned property, within the watershed, not necessarily in city limits. But when I go back to that agreement that never did get ratified, it actually, it showed 11 different property owners there that are within the watershed. And I'm just wondering, are we saying that with this new ordinance that we actually don't really have any control now over what those other entities are actually able to do there? Whereas if in fact this agreement had been ratified, we would have?
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to address your question or Steve's?
I'd like you to address Steve's question.
Okay. Regarding the agreement, I understand it is a little bit convoluted. So first and foremost, the agreement has been ratified. Only one entity didn't sign it, so they're not party to the agreement, which was the Pack River Company. All the other agencies, including the city of Sandpoint, have engaged in this agreement. The agreement is still valid, regardless of if the city council adopts this code or not. It's an agreement that exists, and on page 19 of that agreement, down at the bottom, it says this agreement may be modified by mutual consent of all parties. We have not mutually consented to withdraw from this agreement, so this agreement still exists. It's no longer needed, is what our ordinance is suggesting, in part because much of this agreement is outdated. It's very specific. It gets into the weeds of slopes and different widths that are 30 years old, and we have a lot of statutes and best management practices and documents that address those things. So the value of the agreement, I think, is gone, with the exception that if the value is perceived that this existing agreement ensures that those public agencies are somehow going to be more responsible on their property, that still exists regardless of your actions tonight. This agreement never did restrict any private property owner, and it doesn't today. I understand Steve's concern, and we talked about it quite a bit this morning, and that was my introduction to this evening's presentation. Actually, was trying to get ahead of that question, which is that, again, we do not have, and our attorney's on board this evening as well to kind of speak to it. We never did have, nor do we currently have, the authority to place restrictions by our code on other property owners outside of city limits. So the agreement didn't achieve that, our code didn't achieve that, and we still, by Idaho code regulations, do not have the authority to do so. I understand the concern, and I would say the way we're addressing that concern is that through our best management plan that we hope will be adopted in the next month or so, we have very specific actions about developing memorandums of understanding, very much similar to this agreement, with those individual agencies that are more applicable. That agreement also references parties that no longer own land, like it says that they do. There's just a lot of weaknesses to that. So I think we can do better than this agreement, is my point.
And the second comment that I heard from him regarding 943 was under H or I2, I guess it is, waste disposal, where it says under no circumstances shall garbage, chemicals, oil, or other waste materials be dumped or buried on the property. And it goes on. And so the question that I heard from Mr. Holt was, is that covered elsewhere in the management plan, or do you think that it's adequately reflected in what we're considering here in this ordinance?
I would say it's in both, including our code. That's the provision that doesn't allow any dumping. or discharge or depositing or storing of any pollutant. So that's where that's covered. And furthermore, there's federal regulations around that as well. So yes, I think it's covered in both aspects. I don't think it was missed from the current code that is not enforceable.
Okay. I guess the you know, it's a difference in terms. This one states garbage, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm happy to, are you proposing we add garbage?
Sure.
Okay,
Waste materials, maybe it's a little more general in its wording than what we have in the revised ordinance. And maybe that's to our benefit.
that makes sense.
Is there anyone else, Melissa, that would like to comment on this issue?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Any other questions or comments from council? All right. I'll now read the title of the ordinance as follows. An ordinance of the City of Sandpoint, Municipal Corporation of the State of Idaho, repealing Sandpoint City Code 943, Watershed Protection Zone, creating new Sandpoint City Code Title 7, Chapter 16, Watershed Protection and Access, providing for repeal and severability, and providing for publication and an effective date. I will entertain a motion that the ordinance pass its first reading by title only and the summary is approved.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. This will be a roll call vote.
Councilwoman Sherman,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule,
Yes.
Councilman Sparrow,
Yes.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilman Groot.
Yes.
The ordinance has passed its first reading by title only and the summary is approved. I would entertain a motion that the rules requiring 3 separate readings, once in the ordinance's entirety, be suspended, and that the ordinance pass its second and third readings under suspension of the rules.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. This will be a roll call vote.
Councilwoman Sherman,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule,
Yes.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilman Sparrow,
Yes.
Councilman Groot.
Yes.
Motion passed and this ordinance is considered read, passed, and adopted under suspension of the rules. We'll now entertain a motion to approve the watershed permit procedures resolution. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Sparrow,
Yes.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilman Groot,
Yes.
Councilwoman Sherman,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule.
Yes.
Motion passes. To round out the watershed topic this evening, we will now hear the watershed management plan presentation. Amanda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, we have our consultants, Randy, as well as Mike, online with us here, and I'm going to turn it over to them to provide a presentation to you. It's, again, an introduction similar to how we handled the code and the procedures. We are introducing it tonight and intend to have it on our website for the next month before coming to you for adoption and hopeful adoption in January. And it, as they will describe, goes into a lot more of the details that I know we're all kind of excited to get into. So with that, Randy and Michael, I will turn it over to you if you would like to share your screen.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'll try to share my screen here with this plan. Does everybody see that yet?
Yep.
Okay. So it's been a long process, but I think it has turned out well. We spent some time in the watershed getting to know the features and put together this plan. The beginning of the plan goes through kind of a what is there. The introduction is pretty much everybody already knows most of this information, and there's been a previous plan It talks about the watershed management goals and objectives, the primary goal of protecting your water supply, and then the secondary goal of benefiting fish and wildlife and engaging the public and recreation. There's some history discussed in the plan, and then we go into the population landform. You know, what's the shape, what's the acreage, where does it flow, the ownership of the watershed, which you guys have, you know, more than 50% of the land ownership there. Property boundaries and markers, aesthetics. Each chapter has list specific action items associated with the chapter. And we get into the soils. This is mainly from the USDA NRCS web soil survey. And we talk about the fish, wildlife, and plants. You've got some great habitat up there for cutthroats, rainbows, brook trouts, bull trout, and that's some pretty nice habitat for those species. Wildlife, bald eagles, you know, grizzly bears potentially, probably not the woodland caribou, but potential lynx, potential wolf habitat in there. As well as a variety of other critters. Got lots of, you know, nesting habitat for birds and woody debris, great variety of biodiversity of plants, action items associated with maintaining those species. And this is all this first part of the plan is discussing, like I said, kind of what is the watershed and what's there now. And then we dive into the kind of the second second third of the plan. We discuss our survey work that we did. So we went in and looked at your critical areas in the watershed, wetlands, riparian areas, seeps, geological hazards, steep slopes. We went and surveyed 12 of those, selection of those sites. And we list that information here. Riparian areas, what did we look at? We looked at 4 wetland areas, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 riparian areas, 3 steep slope areas and 1 steep area. So those are described in this plan. And we talk about the best management practices associated with maintaining these areas.
And let me interrupt you just for a moment, Michael, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Is this, the survey work that was done here is just a very small subset of all the critical areas that you have. There was not enough time and or funds allocated to be able to do a full survey of your whole watershed. But because of the application process and the code that you're previously discussed and ratified and working forward, those as new entities or new applications come in, as those areas are walked through and everything, that data of wetlands and seeps and critical areas will be added to these maps and everything that Michael will be going through. I just wanted to interrupt you just for a moment, Michael, to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Correct, Randy. Yeah, we were not able to look at every nook and cranny of the watershed, but we did get a good subset, and we were able to develop a process by through which a GIS analyst could go through and use an algorithm to analyze your watershed aerial map and pick out potential critical areas that any future user might need to look out for. So the next section here, access and roads, we did a road survey of the accessible roads in the watershed, accessible by vehicle. And I think this is probably a good time to pull up the watershed map. I think if I can switch my screen again here, bear with me.
So as Michael is doing this, Michael worked extensively with your GIS staff to develop this and to actually supplement and augment the existing map that the city had, so that current data that we added to the map is there. And as each application comes in, as if a new bike trail is put in or whatever, those will be easily added to this base map. Also the procedures of how to and where to look for, and what is a wetland, what is a seed. All these are defined in the wetland management plan. And as soon as Michael gets this map up, I'll quit yapping. I just thought that I'd take a little pressure off of him while he's
Thank you, Randy. Yeah. Let's see here.
Keep talking.
Good one, man.
Good.
Almost there, I promise. Okay, is that map up on everybody's screen?
Nope.
No, I thought it was there.
You might have to stop sharing and then share again and pick up the other screen.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Might be a better idea. Okay, I think. How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
Map, okay. Yeah, so this is the, we call this the watershed road map. And it is color coded and with different line types. It's pretty simple, I believe. Green, solid line. You can drill down a little bit here, is a vehicular active road accessible by vehicle. Yellow dash line is an inactive road that is a little dicey at times or seasonally accessible by vehicles. And then the red dash lines are inactive roads that are not no longer accessible by vehicle. You can see that along all these routes, there's a lot of little red dots. Each one of these little red dots is a road survey or a culvert survey, which you can click the dot and then it brings up a survey data sheet. And did that switch with me, the screen here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can see your survey data for the road or culvert that we were looking at. Just to kind of give you an example. Am I scrolling too fast for everybody, or is that good enough?
It works.
Okay, we'll keep on trucking here.
And excuse me, Michael, the reason that and just so the council and everyone knows, the reason we did not only color coded, but also different line maps is we were trying to look forward to the, the potential if someone's lost in the basin and you have to make out a whole bunch of maps. Doing it color all of a sudden increases cost. Somebody tries to print it, doesn't work. As having different line items or line segments designs, your emergency response and your fire and that can easily look at this. So it's the little nuances of this map that really will make this very usable as the future goes forward. Excuse me, Michael.
Yeah, sure. And this is just a web map that anybody can look at online. So it's real easy to get to and use. There's more data to unpack out of this thing that we won't get into right now, but just one, we do have the critical areas that I talked about before. Those are also on here as different colored balloons for wetlands and seeps and whatnot. So Amanda, should I keep moving here? How am I doing on time?
You're doing great. Yes, I think we can move on to some of our actions as well.
Okay, let me see. I can pull it back. Did that switch back to the Word or the document?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this plan, this table here in the road and access portion talks about some of the culverts that are causing problems up in the watershed, and this can be used to prioritize some maintenance activities. Action items associated with the roads, the forest roads are prioritizing maintenance actions and inspections and changing the way that culverts are installed currently. We then rotate into an overall road maintenance plan for not only the forest roads, but for the Schweitzer Mountain paved road. And we discussed this with the IHD, with the Highway Department District, with Mel, and their maintenance activities, and just kind of formalizing all these plans so that everyone's on the same page. We reference, so I guess I'll move on to the timber management plan. Was done in 2019. We included that here as a reference. We didn't need to just repeat everything they said. They did a nice job for the timber management. And then we moved into the fire, EMS, and kind of incident management strategy. And it became apparent that it would be a good idea if all of the EMS groups sat down and exchanged contact information and kind of made a plan for who contacts who when something happens in the watershed, so that it's clear and everybody understands who needs to be called. Specifically, when do you call the city if there's someone, search and rescue is looking around in your watershed on your property for someone lost, or if there's a police activity, or if there's a fire. How does the Sandpoint Fire Department respond to those fires on city property in the watershed that's outside of the current city limits? So it discusses that, and talks about your water source, using the water, the reservoir for a water source for firefighting. The water treatment plant, when does the treatment plant shut down? What are the procedures for that in a fire emergency? And then some action items around this plan are circulated in that proposed strategy and contact tree around all the departments. Negotiating some interagency agreements with IDL about their firefighting plans, procedures, and then just access, general interdepartmental access for the roads, and if there's any potential areas that different departments would like access to, potentially reopening some of the inactive road areas. And then we move this is the moving into the last third of the plan. We move into the best management practices and procedures for construction, whether that be with utilities, road construction, or recreational activities. And this part really is kind of nuts and bolts of what a applicant would need to provide under that new permitting process. And it goes through what you would need to provide if you wanted to build a new trail or maintain an existing trail. If you were wanting to, if an entity was wanting to install a utility line or maintain an existing utility line. And some of these, it discusses that they need to map their, any construction project would need to map their alignments, know their project well. They've got to identify the waters and wetlands in their project, and there's minimum best management practices for sediment erosion control in the watershed to maintain the water quality. Most of these new processes will require an erosion sediment control plan, unless it's a very small impact. But any impact is going to require erosion sediment control to some degree. And it also talks about protection of your threatened and endangered species in the watershed. So new road construction is also listed underneath these plans and procedures. That we just bring in some of the state specifications for road construction into this section as well. But very similar BMPs, waters and wetlands, certain endangered species. And then new forest roads are a little different because they're under the Idaho Department of Land's forest practices, but similar flow, a little bit different standards using the Department of Land's standards here. This also discusses inspection frequencies for your city inspectors who are going up to look at these projects. And then the unregulated uses, the hiking, the biking on existing trails, picking berries, cross-country skiing, all that sort of stuff. And some general watershed rules for all users, just kind of the common sense stuff, packing out your trash, no motorized vehicles, and like Amanda was discussing earlier, no camping, no target shooting, hunting, and no equipment, tools, campfires, no smoking. And then just a plug here for cleaning your equipment prior to entering the watershed to prevent the spread of invasive species. Action items here, develop some signage. This references the development of the comprehensive recreational master plan that's in the works. Coordinating with the Idaho Fish and Game about any harvesting opportunities, hunting, fishing. Continuing to perform spring environmental inspections and trainings, and creating a pre-qualified list of professionals that can help applicants with this process, and then identifying educational opportunities and outreach. One thing I missed as I was going down through there is we believe there's opportunities for volunteer groups to help you with a lot of your inspections and surveys in the watershed. And what we did when we did our survey was try to develop a process that would make that pretty streamlined and easy for folks to do.
And his statement there on the inspections, that would be the annual. He was really referencing the annual inspections of the road, because right now as we went through there and looked, there was road failures that were contributing large amounts of sediment, which is a pollutant to your water source. And talking with your water management man earlier, your sediment loads in your plant were already fairly high. By doing these annual road maintenances, as I brought to the council and the mayor a long time ago, we've kind of developed that process. So this could be done by volunteer groups that everything's documented now, and they just have to walk through and take pictures. And with the phone, that's a fairly inexpensive, fairly easy way of being able to do annual maintenance without putting a workload on the city, but by reducing sediment load into your stream and be able to maintain those roads. Now that we're opening, if the city adopts this and opens this up to public use, as we're talking with your fire chief, the chances for fire and everything go up. The chances for people being hurt in the watershed go up. And by knowing the road conditions, knowing which roads are open, being able to access that, knowing where the bike trails are on that overall map are going to be critical in relationship to be able to respond. And that's why this action of knowing what your road maintenance is, your road condition, just like you discussed for your Baldy Mountain, what the road is critical in being able to provide. This one not being mandated by the Baldy Mountain was a contractual issue. This is a kind of a, see why it's a risk assessment. Excuse me, Michael.
No, exactly right. And that's the end of the plan itself. There are a lot of reference documents that are attached, and some addendums that are requested from other agencies, IHD, and the water treatment plant manager on IDL should be in here as well. So the soil information is all included in here, all the maps and different soil types. The IDEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality Source Water Protection Plan, which is being updated as we speak for Little Sand Creek. The survey forms that we developed for the project, those will be included here. Like I said, the 2019 timber management plan is included here. And then all those new construction and maintenance specifications that we listed in the last chapter will be included here for applicants to, or city staff to be able to read through and understand what information is required for those permit applications.
And the BMPs in relationship to how to build anything or how to maintain anything with a minimal effect are included in those appendices.
Right. And that's it. Any questions?
Great, thank you for that presentation. Very, very thorough plan. Any questions from council?
So the potential volunteer groups that are going to help with inspections, what is the line of communication for that? Like as we have people up there and they observe something, so make a comment about a road or see, who then are they calling? Are they calling Kim? Are they calling Chief? Or like,
who's the point of contact?
Yep.
That's a great question. We are establishing in one of the exhibits with this is the contact list and the procedures for that. It's a combination, which I know isn't a very good answer. Obviously, the primary point of contact is 911 for emergency.
But these are inspections. So like,
exactly.
This is how I perceive it is we're going to have people up there, they're going to help assist us do certain things. And it's going to be kind of I'm just wondering like what those phone calls are going to be and who's going to be vetting those. Are we going to get in that like, hey, you know, whatever.
So Amanda, can I take this one?
Sure.
So here in chapter 7, it discusses that process, that we would identify a survey coordinator, coordinating with volunteer groups, safety concerns, crews, number, people in each crew leaders, talks about the first day of the survey, what's going to happen. Throughout the survey, the coordinator will be checking in with people. So those lines of communication and those personnel will be identified prior to any of those survey and inspection activities.
Thank you, Michael. As far as a city point of contact in the interim, until we have those actual crews established, the primary point of contact for the watershed would be myself for now. That is likely changing in the near future, but particularly in this transition phase. I certainly work very closely with Kim, our Parks and Recreation Director. He really leads fundamentally the recreation components and coordination, which we've had a lot of with our various user groups up there currently. And so as for now, it'll be through myself and I engage him as necessary or chief. I do suspect that will change in the future and we will have more of a resource individual that is up there doing ongoing frequent monitoring that we currently don't have. So you ask a good question, we just don't have a name to put in that slot yet. If that's fair, Jennifer.
Yeah, I think the direction ultimately, as we look at expanding activities and then and impacts of those activities and potential liabilities around those impacts, we also need to look at, and our discussions have been around like a community resource officer, potentially more like a park ranger, if you will, specifically for our parks areas. So that's going to be one of those issues that we needed to discuss moving forward relative to staffing, as we're looking at increased use, expanded activity, growing population. So that's certainly on the forefront in how our discussions, where they've gone to date, at least internally and at the administrative level.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from council? All right, thank you again for that presentation. Madam Clerk, is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this issue?
Yes. Mr. Holt?
Yeah, this is Steve Holt with the Lake Ponderay Waterkeeper. Can you hear me?
Yep. We can hear you fine.
Yeah, again, thanks to the council and staff for putting, energy into protecting the watershed. And I appreciate the effort from Randy and Michael as well. I look forward to sort of looking at the plan closer and commenting. There was a couple things that were said that sort of jumped out at me. One was sort of volunteer. I heard some educational opportunities. I heard some survey work, and I heard, volunteer. And I was wondering about monitoring in that area, and if there was consideration for doing that. You put a lot of energy into the plan. It would seem like monitoring would be a good provide some good data to understand how we're actually doing with the plan. And I think that, the Lake Ponderay Waterkeeper would be interested in sort of working with the city to create, a citizen science program such as we have with the lake, and possibly could even get some students from the high school up there to sort of do some monitoring. So I just wanted to point that out and maybe talk about that in the future. But thank you.
So great suggestion, Mr. Holt. Appreciate that. I'd open up to staff, or Randy or Michael wants to comment on that. I welcome any comment you might have.
Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, it's not, we didn't specifically list any groups, because I think that list is, endless. I mean, any interested party, I think, would be welcome.
Yeah, we set this up, we set the monitoring up for this road system so that it would be very easy to be able to train any type of group, going from even a Boy Scout doing his Eagle Scout, his Eagle Merit Badge, right up through just, I'm sure just Friends of the Watershed groups. It's just really walking the roads, seeing how the culverts are, seeing how all the roads are, and being able to see, are the trails that are existing wearing out? Do they need some water barring? It's just an observation. So I think you'll find when you look at the how-tos that we've laid out, it's very easy to be able to pick up and present that to any volunteer group to go forward.
And Amanda, we currently have in place already turbidity monitoring at our intake right there at Little Sand Creek. Do we not?
We do on the intake, but I appreciate Holt's suggestion. I think we can do a lot more.
Okay.
I really do. I think that the actions in the plan that our consultants have proposed will indirectly get us to that point as well, such as the coordination with some of these other state agencies that we've really never capitalized upon to improve some of the conditions around the streams and the waterways. And I think that it's in those applications, it's especially a great opportunity to install some of that monitoring effort, because it's spot on. That's how we assess data, right? What's our base point right now, and what have we done that's impacted it for the positive or the negative? So,
great.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you for that suggestion again, Mr. Holt. Appreciate that.
Maybe it's a project for my recently retired forester husband.
Be a park ranger.
He could be a park ranger.
He could get a twofer.
He could do something all day.
See what.
Okay. All right, anyone else that wants to comment from the public?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So, the final, so let's see, we already approved that. No, that was just a presentation, I'm sorry. So that's going to be up for,
It'll be returning, thank you, Mr. Mayor, it'll be returning to council for action at the second meeting in January. So you have
Okay.
about a month to review it. Please feel free to give me a call, and I'm very excited to start taking feedback and comments on it and get it to Michael and Randy. It'll be on our website by tomorrow in the news section.
okay, thank you for that, please, appreciate that. Okay. The final item on our agenda this evening is a proposed resolution approving an additional extension of the firefighters collective bargaining agreement. City Administrator Jennifer Stapleton will provide a presentation for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be very brief. So we are presenting a 3-month extension to the collective bargaining agreement with the firefighters union while we consider the future and structure of our shared fire services that we are currently in. To that end, our consultants with Fitch and Associates are scheduled to provide a full presentation of their review of our joint fire structure and recommendations from their end at your next council meeting on January 6th. So that will be coming before you quickly, and we will be looking at times on January 7th for the same presentation to be made to both of the fire districts we're currently partnering with, that's Sagal and West Side Fire Districts. We have a steering committee that is formed with representatives of our 3 agencies already talking about some of the draft recommendations, and we will have a report distributed to council members for you to review in advance of the council meeting. It's an extensive report, several hundred pages. So you will receive that before the end of this calendar year, so that hopefully you've got at least a good 10 days to review that in advance of the council meeting, and then they'll be doing the presentation on the report.
Great, thank you for that. Does council have any questions? All right, is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on this issue, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution extending the agreement between the City of Sandpoint and Local 2319 IAFF. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule,
Yes.
Councilman Spurrow,
Yes.
Councilwoman Sherman,
Oh, she froze on us.
froze again. Councilman Groot,
Yes.
Okay, well, we have the votes.
you do.
Councilwoman Sherman, can you
Unfreeze?
unfreeze?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, there we go.
All right.
Motion passes and this meeting is adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.